Testing mic check, mic check. Mojuba, Mojuba, Oloru, Mojuba, Olokim, Mojuba, Olodumare. Oloruna Rabasudaye, Oloruna Rabasunike, Oloruna Raye, Oloruna Lemiajuba. Olodo Niajuba. Mojuba Sheda, Mojuba Koda. Mojuba Ye, Oduno Ni Oduno Duno La. Mojuba Baba, Mojuba Yeye, Mojuba Ara, Mojuba Ile. Mojuba Bobo Wan. Ologo, Araun, Oluwo, Ialosha Baba Losha. Eguni Melese Olodumare. With the permission of the elders in this space, I pour libation to the spirits of those who have passed, the spirits of those who watch over us, the spirits of those who continue to bless us and love us as we celebrate the life of Baba Tenuo Black. As I pour water into this plant, representing the flow of spirit from our realm into the earth realm, please think of and say the names of any ancestors, any loved ones who have passed that you would like to be in this space with us as we continue to celebrate the spirit of Baba Tenuo Black. Ashe. At this moment, say any names of any people who have passed aloud, all together. Catherine Elizabeth Willis Henderson, Ashe. 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 Martin Luther King Jr., Ashe. Malcolm X, Ashe. Harold Washington, Ashe. Ida B. Wells Burnett, Ashe. Gwendolyn Brooks, Ashe. Nat King Cole, Ashe. Louis Armstrong, Ashe. Lil Hardin, Ashe. Ashe. For all of those names we do not know, we pour libations and say Ashe. For all of our grandmothers, grandfathers, aunts, uncles, Ashe. For any children who may have passed, for brothers and sisters who may have passed, for friends and community who may have passed, we pour libations, we say Ashe. To all of the spirits waiting in the spiritual world that are waiting to come back into human form, we pour libations and we say Ashe. We give thanks to all ancestors across all space and time, all of our ancestors who exist all over the world that are here in Chicago. We pour libations and we say Ashe. 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 As we are gathered here in this space, may the energies and spirits of all of those who love us continue to bless us and guide us. May they be with us as we continue throughout our days. And to all of the life that exists, Ashe.
Good afternoon. I hold in my hand an autographed copy of Bridges of Memory, Chicago's first wave of Black migration by one Temuel D. Black, Jr. I first met Temuel Black not long after he published this wonderful oral history when he came to visit us at St. Thomas Church in Bronzeville, where I served as a priest during graduate school. As I watched him autograph the book and greet Cliff and me with his characteristic warmth, I thought to myself, it takes a very special person to show such graciousness and hospitality that he makes you feel welcome in your own house. Today, I feel especially grateful to welcome you to this Temuel's house, since he was a fellow alumnus of this university. My name is Morris Charles, Dean of Rockefeller Memorial Chapel here on the campus of the University of Chicago. And it is my privilege to greet you on behalf of Temuel and his family and friends and loved ones, especially his beloved wife, Zenobia Johnson Black. And I hope that you will know and feel that now and in the days ahead, we surround you with our love and support. As we begin our celebration of a life well lived, a life of jazz and justice, please welcome three persons of prayer who will lift our spirits in their own authentic way. Imam Tariq El Amin, resident Imam of Masjid El Taqwa, Rabbi Rachel S. Mikva, the Rabbi Herman E. Shulman Chair and Associate Professor of Jewish Studies at Chicago Theological Seminary, and Bishop Horace E. Smith, MD, pastor of Apostolic Faith Church. Let us open our hearts as they lead us in prayer.
Good afternoon. And from the Muslim faith tradition, Assalamu alaikum. May the peace that only God can give be upon each and every one of you. Let us pray. In the name of God, our merciful benefactor, our merciful Redeemer, all praise, honor, and glory belong to God, the Lord, cherisher and sustainer of all the systems of knowledge. Guide us to the straight path, the path of pure speech and righteous deeds, the path of those who live with the blessing of your remembrance, and not those who harm themselves through forgetfulness of you. Part of the prophetic model is to call people to remember where they came from and to remember those who came before them, to call us to remember our struggles and our victories, to call us to remember our uniqueness and our connectedness. We thank you for giving us Brother Temuel Black. We thank you for directing him to teach, to agitate, to organize, and to share his life with the city of Chicago and the world. Help us to see the best in each other. Help us to use the knowledge of a divided history to build a united, healthy future together. Amen.
You may wonder why it takes so many clergy to bless and to pray. The rabbis of old taught that if even two of us come together and there are words of sacred knowledge passed between us, then the divine presence dwells there. My Christian cousins may recognize echoes of that from the Gospel according to Matthew, where 2 or 3 gather in my name, there I am in the midst of them. So, God of many names, Jehovah, Allah, the one, the path, the spirit of life, creator, God our Father, God our Mother, merciful one, God abundant. The psalmist called you Adonai, my Lord. Adonai roi lo echsar, binot desha yarbitseni al mei menuchot inahaleni nafshi yeshovev. Gam ki elech begetz al mavet lo irara, ki ata imadi. Adonai is my shepherd, I lack nothing. You let me lie down in green pastures. You lead me to calm waters. You renew my life. You guide me on paths of righteousness as befits your name. Even when I walk in the valley of deep darkness, I fear no evil, for you are with me. These are the first words that occur to me in the face of loss, especially the loss of someone who helped to guide us all to righteousness, who helped to make us all a little less afraid. The second voice that comes to me, and it's not from my tradition, it's actually, as I remember Tim Black, I think of wise words from Reverend Dr. Howard Thurman, who wrote a meditation on Christmas, actually, that sits in my heart separate from the holiday, which is not mine. He, in turn, had borrowed and been inspired by the prophet Isaiah. Thurman said that when the song of the angels is stilled, the real work begins. He said, to find the lost, to heal the broken, to feed the hungry, to release the prisoner, to rebuild the nations, to bring peace among people, to make music in the heart. Let Tim's song never be stilled, because we have made this work our own. Amen.
Good afternoon, everyone. To the honored governor of this state and the mayor of this city, to the chancellor of this august organization and institution, and certainly today to the family of Professor Black, we honor you today as we come and gather as a people of God together. The program says that we come to remember, and we come to reflect, and we also come to honor. God, you have taught us to follow the examples of those who teach us values and virtue. We thank you for the life of your choice servant, Timuel Black. We thank you that for decades, he taught us excellence, he taught us true humanity. You remind us through one of your other prophets, Dr. King, and I quote, he says an individual has not started living until he or she can rise above the narrow confines of their individualistic concerns to the broader concerns of all humanity. What a life that Dr. Black taught us. He epitomized exactly these sayings. He understood value and virtue of every person. Perhaps we can reflect on the issues of these pandemics we're dealing with even today. The biologic one, the economic one, the social justice one. But I believe above all those, we're dealing with a pandemic of forgetfulness. We have not remembered what you have taught us, Lord, that from one blood you made all of us, that we inhabit this planet together. And perhaps the pandemics remind us that we must all appreciate each other. Thank you for this life of Timuel Black. What a great example of humanity. One who was an historian of the first rank, a champion for social justice, a demander of liberty and justice for everyone, a humble servant, a model of excellence. Father, forgive us as we struggle. We struggle under the burden of not recognizing one another. We have forgotten in some ways the beauty of our common humanity. Forgive us today. Let Timeo Black's legacy and life not only remind us, let us not only come today to honor him, but Lord, our greatest honor would be to epitomize the values and the virtue that he taught us. So even today, as we gather together from all walks of life, teach us the honor of commitment. Teach us that we must embrace his life by more than words, but by acts and deeds. And teach us that from one blood you made us all, as we strive to reach a future that is better, the one that Timeo Black demanded that we work toward. Thank God for his life. Thank God for his legacy.
There are many things that Tim loved. Jazz was definitely one. Let's hear it again for that fantastic tribute. Leandro Lopez Verratti on piano, Stuart Miller on bass, Yusef Ernie Adams on drums, and the incomparable Orbit Davis on trumpet. Thank you. Welcome, everyone, friends, family, and distinguished guests, to this celebration of Timuel Black. We gather today to honor a man who gave so much to us all. We come together in appreciation and gratitude for the light Tim shined on us all, and we pray to continue to bask in the warmth of his brilliance for years to come. We also extend a warm welcome to those of you that are viewing from home as we live stream today's event. My name is Michelle Boone, and it is my honor to be with you today on this occasion. Dr. Black was a very important person to me, a friend, a mentor, a teacher, and probably one of the best role models of human excellence I've had the privilege to know and witness. I'm sure many of you feel the same way, as evident from the crowd that is here today. On behalf of the entire family of Tim, thank you, thank you, thank you for your support to his devoted wife and life partner, Zenobia Johnson Black. Many of you here are here because of Tim and his many accomplishments. I'm here because of Zenobia. Tim just happened to be that man that lived with Z. Losing a loved one is never easy, and losing a legend is even harder. So I ask that you please continue to keep Zenobia in your heart and prayers. And if we all were so lucky to have someone looking after us and loving us the way that Zenobia did Tim, we might all live beyond 100 years. So we have a full program today, and I'm here to ensure that all of our speakers and performers keep to the time limits. We all love Tim, and we want to be sure to honor him respectfully and on time. So we'll begin with remarks from the Honorable Governor of Illinois, J.B. Pritzker, followed by our Honorable Mayor Lightfoot, and then hear from Robert J. Zimmer, the Chancellor of the University of Chicago. Their remarks will be followed by tributes from poet Usini Eugene Perkins, and finally from Juliana Richardson, founder and executive director of the infamous History Makers program. So please join me now in welcoming the governor of the great state of Illinois, Governor J.B. Pritzker.
Well, thank you very much, Michelle. I was thinking as the jazz was playing about how important jazz is as a representation of life, the creativity, the inspiration that it gives us, just like Timuel Black. To Zenobia, to Irmatria, to her husband, Maurice Thomas, and to all the family and friends who had to wake up in a world today without Timuel Black, and a few weeks ago for the very first time. It can be an imposition that so many of us want to express our grief to you. We miss him too, and we want you to know how much we miss him. So thank you for allowing us to honor him and his legacy. It's important for Chicago, for Illinois, and for the nation. Most of us could only hope to witness a century on this earth. Timuel Black shaped his century. He took on corporations, fighting to ensure black voices were loud and proud in the labor movements of the 20th century. He took on the state of Illinois to protect the right to vote for all people. He took on our political system, helping to elect the first black mayor, helping to elect the first black woman to the United States Senate from Illinois, and the first black president of the United States. He inspired the next generation, students and reporters and historians and activists, and of course among those, the young man who came to Chicago, became a community organizer, and was elected president. Born as one world war ended, only to serve in another, Timuel couldn't have imagined that he should have had every reason to lose faith in humanity, just based on those 2 world wars. Many others might have lost faith. But Timuel was different. He always carried with him, as he called it, an attitude of optimism. In rightful and righteous mission, he always pushed forward with heart and with zeal. He documented the Great Migration that shaped this city and this country and changed history as he lived it, standing up for black students in Chicago public schools, standing up against Jim Crow housing and job discrimination here on the South Side. He never lost sight of what he hoped this great city that he loved would someday become. Most of all, as he gained acclaim and notoriety, he never lost sight of the community that grounded him. Everyday Chicagoans anchored his work, from his first 2 books to his countless tours of Bronzeville to the free lectures that he shared with his neighborhood and with the world. No act of kindness was too small for Timuel. And by insisting that he was better than no one, he became the very best of us. In 2013, even after more than 90 years of hard work on this earth, Timuel Black said, "Every day that I'm here, I think, what am I going to do tomorrow?" It's that question, asked day after day after day, that sets leaders apart. A question that, asked year after year after year, delivers previously unimaginable progress. What am I going to do tomorrow? A question that today I hope all Illinoisans will ask themselves to honor this great man, larger than life, who improved the lives of all of us.
Good evening, everyone. We are here again to honor our friend, our brother, our teacher, Timuel Black, who was a freedom fighter without parallel in the history of our city. Like many of you, I considered Tim a personal teacher, so it's that part of his legacy that I want to speak to today. Like many of you, I too wept when I heard of his passing back in October. And I want to thank Zenobia for inviting me to say a few words on behalf of the city of Chicago and for giving us a chance again to say thank you to Tim. Today is a day of remembrance, but it's also a day of celebration. Tim was a son of our city, and he was a gift to our city, our state, and our country. I don't have to recount for you today all of his astounding contributions, all of the marches, the union drives, the political campaigns that he organized. Nor do you need any reminder of the schools where he taught, the institutions he helped to create, or the books that he wrote. Today you'll hear stories about Tim, and we'll hear some of his favorite music, enjoy the warmth and comfort of each other's company. We stand united in our love and gratitude for the life of Tim Black. If you were lucky enough to spend time with him, you heard one or more of his famous aphorisms. He had a gentle way of chiding hypocrites, invoking the voice of his grandmother, a woman born into slavery. He told the story that when he was a kid, perhaps misbehaving, his grandmother would tell him, "I can't hear what you're saying because what you're doing talks so loud." He would smile when retelling that line, and I think about it from time to time myself. Tim's decades as an educator in our city allowed him to share with thousands of young people. And because of his memorable warmth and good humor, he was one of those unforgettable teachers who for the rest of his life remained in contact with students. I know that many alumni of his beloved DeSable High School are here with us today, showing how deeply he was loved. You can give a shout out for DeSable. And anyone who was close to him knew he never, ever stopped organizing, advocating, and spreading his spirit of optimism. My wife reminded me that on a night that I stepped before the residents of the city for the very first time as mayor-elect, Tim was on the stage behind me, cheering and urging me on. As a Black person in this world, most of us know that we can recite by name the giants on whose shoulders we stand. Whether they are moms or dads, grandparents, siblings, teachers, pastors, or others, we know that as Black folks, we never pass through this world alone. Someone sacrificed for us to be able to fulfill our God-given talent. Timeo Black was such a person for me. His life work paved the way for Lori Lightfoot to be the mayor of this great city. His footprints were ahead of me on my path, and he carried the bright lantern as I forged into the unknown ahead of me. Tim was a man of action and not just of words. So let's commit ourselves to making his an evergreen legacy by picking up the torch that Tim left for us. Let's strive to walk in his footsteps, follow his example, and never cease fighting for justice, equality, peace, and dignity for everyone in our life, in our existence. Thank you all. Thank you to Zenobia. God bless you. God bless the family. And God bless Tim Black, our brother who's been called home. Thank you.
Both personally and on behalf of the University of Chicago, I welcome you to Rockefeller Chapel for this remembrance and celebration of the life of Timeo Black. I especially want to welcome his family, particularly Zenobia Johnson Black, And I also want to offer a welcome to Governor J.B. Pritzker, Mayor Lori Lightfoot, and other elected or appointed public officials who are here with us today. I offer my sincere condolences to all those for whom the loss of Tim Black is a deeply personal loss. And I know there are many here today for which that's true. Rockefeller Chapel is a fitting location for this service, for it was on this site in 1956 that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. made his first major speech in Chicago, an event that Tim helped make possible. Timuel Black was a beloved man of many accomplishments with an outsized impact on the lives of many individuals and on communities, and I am proud to say he was my friend. I also want to remind you that he was an alumnus of the University of Chicago, having completed his master's degree in history here in 1954. The university is deeply proud that Tim Black is our alumnus, and beyond his degree, he's been recognized by the university by being awarded the university's Benton Medal for Distinguished Public Service, the Alumni Diversity Leadership Award, and the establishment of the Timuel D. Black Edible Arts Garden. To me, Tim carried on with some distinctive perspectives that should be important to all of us. He was a deep believer in the importance of history for understanding both ourselves as individuals and understanding our communities, and for understanding how this history can impact our actions today. His work, both as a scholar and as a person, on the history of the African American experience in Chicago and nationwide is a profound example of this. And he was deeply committed to the education of young people about this history and how the understanding of history could help them in contributing to society more broadly. His ability to simultaneously focus on and integrate the lives of individuals with the history of communities, and history, both its tragic and profoundly sad aspects, as well as its joyous and exuberant moments, with hopes and actions for the future, is a reflection of a deeply talented mind and sophisticated thought. That was Tim Black. All of this came together each fall to the great benefit of University of Chicago students when he would take a group of first-year college students on a tour of Bronzeville, explaining its history and encouraging students to take advantage of opportunities at the university to engage with the Southside community. Tim's impact will live on, and his wisdom will continue to inform us all. But we have lost an extraordinary man, and one that I, and I know others, will continue to miss.
To my deepest sympathy to Sister Zenobia and family. This is not a memorial poem. This is a poem I wrote for Brother Timuel when he was living at age 100. Every village has a griot whose impeccable voice becomes the narrator of a people's humanity, ethos, and history that spans several generations. Bronzeville was truly blessed when you became the oral archivist of the stories that made it sacred. From the days it was called the Black Belt to the first Black migration, when many of our people left the South from the cane fields of Georgia and the Delta region of Mississippi, from the cotton plantations of South Carolina, and your birthplace of Alabama, seeking consolation from racism to labor in the stockyards, steel mills, and factories in Carl Sandburg's City with the Big Shoulders. And after you served in the Army during the Second World War, you returned to the streets of Bronzeville and continued to record its stories. From the race ride in 1919 to the jubilance of the Bud Billikens Parade, from the ordinary people who rode the jitneys along South Park Boulevard. Some of you remember the jitneys, I don't know, which was adorned by fashionable brownstones. When artists of many genres exhibit their creative works at the Southside Arts Center and the DuSable Museum of African American History, when the blues and jazz artists grace the stage of the Regal Theater with crescendo that rivaled Harlem's fabled legacy as the epicenter of Black culture and art. But you were not just a teller of stories. You also helped to make them and champion many causes as an activist in Chicago's freedom movement and mobilized Chicagoans of all hues to participate in the March on Washington and became a striving force in our fledgling Black labor movement. And you used your political savvy to help elect Harold Washington become Chicago's first Black mayor and played a formidable role in the election of President Barack Hussein Obama. Your voice echoed the diligence of our ancestors and leave an indelible legacy on every aspect of Bronzeville, protracted struggle for social justice. And we praise you with calabashes of love for being our centurion griot who told our stories with integrity and compassion. Peace, love to everyone.
Good afternoon. It's nice to share the stage with Ucini Eugene Perkins. He is one of our history makers, as are many of you in the audience. But I read about Ucini when I was a college student and an aspiring actress. It's so fitting for us to be here in Rockefeller Chapel. Tim loved Hyde Park and the University of Chicago. Like Michelle Boone, I want to thank Zenobia. I want to thank you for how you loved Tim. You loved him into 102 years of wonderful living, and you were not selfish with your love. You allowed all of us, and I mean all of us, to sit with him, to engage him, to learn from him, and for that, all of us are indebted to you. And now we need to hold you up in this season of your living. Chicago has its lakefront, its sports teams, its cultural institutions, its skyline, and Chicago had its griot.
and his name was Timuel David Black. Born on December 7th in the year 1918, Birmingham was his birthplace, but Chicago was indeed his home. I was first introduced to Tim by Jim Grossman, who at the time was head of education and research at Chicago's Newberry Library. I had told him of my idea of the history makers, and he said that I should definitely speak to Tim Black. Tim was like rites of passage for all things Black Chicago and all things historic. I remember it like it was yesterday. It was September 19th, 1999. I had traveled to sit with him in his apartment, having climbed those steps to tell him of my idea. So it meant so much, Zenobia, when you told me that he was in hospice, that I could come and massage his feet and eat fried chicken with the two of you and drink tea and experience that brilliant mind one more time. But back in 1999, I was a recovering lawyer who initially had wanted to have a career on the stage. I had majored in theater arts and American studies, but I was not a scholar, and I needed to know if my idea had merit, and with his approval, with those words of encouragement, with his belief in our mission, we have grown to be the nation's largest African American video oral history archive, with 3,400 interviews. Life stories of well-known and unsung African Americans recorded in 413 cities and towns across the United States and abroad. The Library of Congress serves as our permanent repository, and as I stand before you today, we are the largest and most comprehensive recording of the Black experience in the history of the United States. How great is that? And we owe that to the support and encouragement of Tim Black. He was always there for us to talk things through, to provide context, even up to 3 weeks before his passing. I was the student of the ultimate teacher, and I will always hold him, this man, in my debt and gratitude. I remember once when he was presenting for us at the University of Illinois, how I marveled at how in the telling of his own story, he simultaneously gave us a history lesson in the Black experience. In the early years, we returned to South Drexel to interview him on June 19th, 2000. And my favorite quote from that time, when he said that Uncle Sam had come calling, and he said he didn't have an uncle named Sam. I've repeated that so many times. In the beginning of our interviews, we ask our favorite questions. And so we asked him those. His favorite vacation destination. He said he didn't like to take vacations. I go on conferences occasionally. I go out of the country. That's like a vacation. Your favorite time of year, Tim? I like spring and fall in Chicago. Those are the times that I enjoy most because I can walk casually and just see people. Your favorite food? He said, I really don't have any favorite foods. I grew up during the Great Depression, and that period of my life, you felt good just having food to eat. He chuckled. So I can pretty nearly go along all across all ethnic lines. I like meat, pork, beef, lamb, and veal. And I might add, he likes fried chicken too. He said he didn't like white bread. He preferred bran or rye bread and cornbread, cooked bread, biscuits, and that sort. Your favorite color? I guess dark, he said. Not too dark because I'm brown. I like brown. Your favorite phrase or saying? Well, my mother had a statement that came from a Bible, prayer. Prayer changes things. He said, I like Ellington's Come Sunday. I like the sunrise because it brings a new day. or Lord, Lord, above, God of memory, God of love, please look down and see my people through. He said, I enjoy thinking about those quotations as statements of faith. At the end of his 4-hour interview with us, and we all know that Tim was the master oral historian, he ended by saying, when I started going to the University of Chicago, my mother would call up my friends that used to bother her and tell her what we were not doing right, my brother and my sister and me. She said, TD's at the University of Chicago. And I thought you might want to know that. For my parents talking about my brother, Walter, and me went way beyond the rewards for them. They were not into the material things that we were able to give them, but into the spiritual. They had been able to realize through us the hopes and dreams that their parents brought out of slavery. When I look out on the ocean, he said, I see my ancestors being brought here in chains. And I have to wonder what it might have been not knowing where they were going. Who's going to be in charge? What actually was in their minds? To that extent, they had to have had faith. That the spirituality, not Christianity. They had to believe that somehow there was a power that was bigger, that was going to see them through. I had responsibilities, Tim said, to carry on their mission to others. That tomorrow is another day, because when you lose that sense of tomorrow, it's all over. He went on to say, and this is in the year 2000, what frightens me is among too many young people, the sense of tomorrow is not there. The communication between human beings is so sparse now. You push a button, you get all the information you need. You look at the television, but you can't ask the television the right questions. You can't respond in the right way. I'm gratified, he said, that I had an opportunity to live in a generation where I had a mother and father that I could talk to, that I had a grandmother that I saw, and that I had a chance to grow up in a city like Chicago, where I was able to make, in Tim's way, he said, a little difference. Tim made a lot of difference to this city. And we are so very lucky that we lived at a time that he could walk amongst us, love us, educate us, and laugh with us. God bless you, Tim. And please check on us at the History Makers. Our work will continue in your honor. Thank you.
Jazz has a happy tone of encouragement and an inspirational sound, and most of jazz is humorous and informative. Even during the Depression, we were not depressed, because wherever we happened to be, jazz music would give us information about life, and the beat we would walk to on the streets would make us feel good toward one another. And there was a universality and a humanity to the music that made us feel trouble don't last always. These are the words of Dr. Timuel D. Black, Jr. I had the pleasure and the honor of meeting Dr. Black at one of my first nonprofit roles, which was remarkably the Jazz Institute of Chicago, as it still is, again. He was on the board along with the likes of then State Senator and now current U.S. Congressman Jesus Chuy Garcia, political strategist Don Rose, and Lou Kreinberg, all of whom worked together in the civil rights movement. They began discussions with teachers and band leaders that resulted in the formation of the Jazz Institute's Jazz Links education programs in 2003. These programs live on in our Jazz Masters Residency Program in public schools, Jazz Link Student Council, jam sessions, and so much more. Dr. Black served with dedication on this board for over 25 years, and even through the pandemic, you all, he attended every Zoom meeting, and monthly, and I have to thank Zenobia for making sure his electronics were set up right. It was a joy to see your face every month as well. He always also contributed to the conversation and to the vision for the organization and our programming. And I know we were just one of many jazz organizations that he was a part of. Hyde Park Jazz Festival, the Hyde Park Jazz Society, the Southside Jazz Coalition, the Duke Ellington Society, and many more. This deep love of jazz was a part of his whole life, and it started with Louis Armstrong. His mother took him at age 5 to see Mr. Armstrong at the Vendome Theater. Baba Black was also one of the neighborhood kids that Mr. Armstrong would take to the movies. He and his friends were attracted to Duke Ellington equally for his artistry and sophisticated scores, as well as their high fashion style, which they felt reflected the true dignity of our race. This summer, the Jazz Institute was proud to be awarded a prestigious re-granting initiative from the city of Chicago that, with his blessing, we named the Dr. Timuel Black Inspiration and Education Project, where we have awarded 6 musicians cash for themselves, as well as program money to teach and create music in the communities of their choice. And I'd like to just add one story on a personal note from my days in the 2000s with the Jazz Institute of Chicago. In addition to informative car rides, breakfasts at Valois, and driving through Bronzeville, stories about how the Harlem Globetrotters got their start, I remember one moment from those days. One of our board members, and I believe it was Chuy Garcia, and I know I'm speaking for a historian, so if that's not correct, please fact check me. But I believe he lost his mother during that time. Dr. Black called the office and said, "Heather, we must send a card and flowers." And because I was raised right, I said, "Yes, sir, of course, Dr. Black, we will send a card and flowers." He repeated himself, "Heather, we must send something. It's the right thing to do." I hear his voice often and feel that passionate urgency when it comes to matters of etiquette, culture, kindness, and class. It is the right thing to do. So Dr. Black, in addition to preserving the legacy of jazz, remembering and passing on its history to our youth, keeping jazz in the schools and as a vital part of education, training up the next generation of jazz musicians, fighting the good fight of justice and harmony, and dismantling systematic racism, we all promise to keep on keeping on and making sure that we keep as our compass star the right thing to do. In that light, it is now my great honor to introduce a band of Jazz Links alumni playing Afrocentric by Joe Henderson. Please welcome Irvin Pierce on tenor sax, Manuel Canchola on alto sax, Tony Milano on piano, Thaddeus Tukes on vibes, Carmani Edwards on bass, and Josh Ross on drums.
was with Dr. King, and we were going to plan around and in McCormick Place the beginning of whatever the march was going to be. And we were coming up steps, and a man was talking over the telephone in the room that we were going to, and that was Duke Ellington. Dr. King said, "Oh, there's Duke Ellington." Duke looked around and saw Dr. King and said, "Oh, there's Dr. King." Well, almost immediately, they met together and shook hands. And I was not rejected, but I was out of the conversation of picture as they talked to each other about how music was a very important part of the civil rights movement. And since I was not a musician, only a listener, and these two giants of music and demonstration would talk with each other about how they could cooperate with one another, and they were talking about one another to one another. And I was so proud that since I had met and knew both of them, I just listened to the conversation until it was completed. That, for me, was a famous day in history.
And just a brief program note, we regret that Tammy McCann is unable to join today due to a family emergency. Only such a thing could keep her from it. But she has engaged this collection of extraordinary musicians who will be led today by Jazz Institute of Chicago board member Rajiv Halim. And to echo what Juliana said, they'll be playing Come Sunday, and that quote that she read is so absolutely perfect. Lord, dear Lord, I've loved God Almighty. God of love, please look down and see my people through. This prayer for humanity set to music by Duke Ellington was at the forefront of every action of Dr. Black's life. The legacy of his dedication to his faith, family, and community will resonate for years to come. Ladies and gentlemen, Duke Ellington's Come Sunday.
Good afternoon. I'm Joe Harrington. I'm a founding member of the Timuel D. Black Education Foundation, and I'm honored to be here today. Tim and I had a long-standing relationship and a number of connections, but probably the thing that connected us more than anything else is we both attended the same church, First Unitarian Church of Chicago, which is just up the street, a block away from here. Tim became a member of that church in June of 1956, and he was a member for 65 years. I'm only a member for 20 years, but that's one of the major things we had in common. And I also had the opportunity to take Tim to a lot of his speaking engagements. And one of the things that amazed me about Tim is I would pick him up and take him home. He'd always come downstairs, get in the car, take him to his engagement, then we come back, he'd get out of the car and said, "I can make it from here." What's amazing about that is Tim lived on the second floor. And at 101 years old, he would get out the car and walk up those 2 flights. And I know when I go up those 2 flights, I take a break before I get to the door. And so I was always amazed to see him do that. Albert Schweitzer once said, "At times our own light goes out and is rekindled by a spark from another person. Each of us has cause to think with deep gratitude of those who have lighted the flame within us." All of us here are here because Tim lighted and continues to ignite the flame within all of us. If he were here today, and Heather almost, in fact, she said this earlier, there's something that Tim would say without a doubt. "I'm so glad trouble don't last always." And every time I went somewhere, that's one of the things that would come out of his mouth. And many of you might have seen the picture of him as you came in with John Lewis. That picture was taken when Tim received in 2013 the inaugural Chicago Champion of Freedom Medal in recognition of his work in civil rights, both locally and nationally. And I was honored to be there because Zenobia had invited me to be there. So I was really honored to be there, not only to see him, but to hear John Lewis. This is something that John Lewis said: "Never be afraid to make some noise and get in good trouble, necessary trouble." So John Lewis talked about good trouble. Most people think about trouble and they think about something bad. But there is something called good trouble. Now, I'm going to sit down shortly, but we have a number of speakers that are going to come up. All of them know about good trouble because that's what they do. They cause good trouble. The first one will be Melody Span Cooper, who I know is a friend, Chairman and CEO of Midway Broadcasting. She'll be followed by Don Rose, journalist, political consultant, and activist. I actually told him that he and I had met when I was a very young man because he helped manage Al Raby's campaign when Al Raby ran for alderman, and I was Al Raby's driver. After that, he'll be followed by Robert T. Starks, Professor Emeritus, Northeastern Illinois University, and then Greg Kelly, President, SEIU Healthcare, and board member of the Coalition of Black Trade Unionists, the Chicago Federation of Labor, and United Families. As I step away, I'm going to leave you with one last quote that I think should inspire all of us, and these are the words of Paul Robeson. "Sorrow will one day turn to joy. All that breaks the heart and oppresses the soul will one day give place to peace and understanding, and everyone will be free."
To Zenobia and the family, to our Honorable Governor J.B. Pritzker, our First Lady MK, the Honorable Lori Lightfoot, to all of our illustrious guests. I had an opportunity to sit down for a candid conversation on WVON with Professor Black in 2016 to discuss what the two of us shared in common: a love of Black Chicago. He was 97, and the spirit just came over me to capture him. I was always a fan of his because he was so full of wisdom, knowledge, and affection about our people and our history in this city. I had his book, like Reverend Charles, Bridges of Memory, and I loved it so. I learned so much from it. I must have read it 2 or 3 times. So I called Zenobia to see if she would, ask him to sit for an interview with me. He agreed to do it. We did it early January when our studios were still on 87th Street. It was a snowy day, and because of his age, I thought he might cancel. But in came Professor Black. He was sharp, white expensive shirt, red sweater. He walked with deliberate short steps that I attributed to him being cautious of falling. And when I saw that, I thought, I hope I can get at least 1 hour out of him. But it turned to 2.5 hours of the most powerful interview I have ever been a part of. Because I had read his book, I felt I could match wits with him, at least on some things in Chicago. About 30 minutes into the interview, I think he was getting a little flustered with me. So I decided to do what any student of history should do: shut up and listen. And I did. And Professor Black began to generously and effortlessly pour history into that microphone that many never knew. Like the fact that Jesse Bingham, who was the first black man to own a bank in Chicago, actually paid for Bessie Coleman's way through flight school in Paris after seeing an article about her in the Chicago Defender. And how the Mammoth DuSable High School was actually built due to the overcrowding of Wendell Phillips. That the birth of Black political empowerment came out of the Third Ward Democratic Party under the tutelage of Chicago's first Black Congressman, Bill Dawson, and gave birth to politicos like John Stroger and Metcalf. And how the cultural differences between Blacks on the South Side and the West Side had less to do with class and more to do with whether they came from corporated Mississippi or incorporated Mississippi, better known as the country. And how 63rd Street was the center of the universe for Black entertainment, hosting the likes of Billie Holiday, Johnny Hartnett at the Strand and Fitzhugh's. It was fascinating. Professor Black told fascinating stories. It was a day I'll never forget and will always cherish. I was taught that people are born with talents and gifts. Talents are those things we do well, that we work on, that we practice. A gift is God-given, effortless, difficult for most, simple to the one who possesses it. Professor Black had many talents: civil rights activist, educator, strategist, author, husband, father, but to me, his gift was being one of the nation's preeminent storytellers. In 102 years, he didn't squander his gifts or his talents. As a Christian, Pastor Smith, I believe we all have to meet our Maker. When some of us get there, I think God just says, just come on, just come on. I think when others of us get there, he says, well done, my faithful servant. But when Professor Black arrived, I believe God said, wow, wow. Well done, my good and faithful servant. You finished your course, and much like my servant Moses, you worked to free your people. Your work was well done. Rest in heaven, Professor Black.
I've been told to hurry it up because everybody else is taking too much time. Tim Black helped reshape the political culture of this town in many ways, keeping the progressive movement alive and on an even keel during the roughest of times. He was a moral gyroscope, teaching social justice far beyond his high school and college classrooms, though that was not an easy struggle. The whole city was his classroom as he shared his wisdom and humanity as a writer, speaker, organizer, but without the constant need to seek out the cameras. I'm personally grateful to have helped him spread his gospel for several decades working at his side. I was press secretary for many things he was doing, but we first met in 1962 after the Rainbow Beach wade-ins integrated that beach. And we bonded over jazz. He impressed me by telling me that he went to school with Nat King Cole, and I impressed him by saying I got high with Charlie Parker. In 1963, he asked me to serve as press secretary and consultant for his independent campaign for alderman of the 4th Ward. We didn't win that one, but it was a very important point because we organized several others, I think there were 7 independent black candidates who were working, as we put it, to increase the quality and the quantity of black representation. And this is when Tim introduced the phrase that really put him on the map, plantation politics. And we went on after that to organize the Midwest area for the March on Washington. I was his press secretary there. And for many other things, we went on to the school boycotts. Some of you may be old enough to have seen the movie about it anyway. In the following years, it was Tim who reached out to the budding independent political movement on the north side, which led eventually to the coalition that helped elect Harold Washington mayor, as well as later, what's this guy's name? Obama, yeah. Tim had the capacity to be a leader, not a front man. In the course of all this, he had often to wage battles inside the black community against the old line machine aldermen tied to Mayor Daley, and in fact, a couple of the old line civil rights movements who were also tied to Mayor Daley. Yeah, that was not an easy thing to do. He was at my side in later campaigns that I was running. Most importantly, I think for many of us, was the campaign that defeated Edward Hanrahan, the man who had, you know who he was. Anyway, we went on doing many, many things together, and our biographies merge quite often on the next 2 or 3 decades, so including being on the Jazz Institute board together. And so rather than give you my biography, I'll let the other people talk about Tim's. I do want to say that the last time I saw him, we were at the Hyde Park Jazz Festival's, excuse me, that's an allergic cough, don't worry. The Hyde Park Jazz Festival's fundraiser, and it was held, of all places, in a venue in Bridgeport. Some of you may be old enough to know that Bridgeport was the den of iniquity run by Mayor Daley and other such folk. And I looked over at Tim over the table, and I said, Tim, did you ever imagine that we could be sitting with another 50 black people in the middle of Bridgeport listening to some jazz? And he said, I never imagined that. Well, I'm glad he lived to see it, because he helped make it possible. Thank you.
Good afternoon. And to my good friend Melody, I was born in Incorporated, Mississippi. I am pleased to be here to salute my friend, mentor, teacher, political strategist, Tim Black. I was in the park with Reverend Jesse Jackson and hundreds of others at Tim's 102nd birthday that was held in the park right across the street from his house. And we enjoyed every bit of it. He was in great spirit. And I remember walking out of the apartment to the park with him, and he said, you know, the D in my name stands for damn. So he said, I am Tim Damn Black. Tim was, of course, a historian, but I like to think of him as not only a historian, but a political scientist. He was a political activist, a strategist, and of course, a political historian. He understood politics from the bottom to the top. After serving in the Army and attending Roosevelt University and later the University of Chicago, he served at Roosevelt with some of the giants of black politics. Men like Harold Washington, Gus Savage, Bennett Johnson, and others. And they, of course, in their debates and strategies, set the stage for the civil rights revolution that was about to come aboard in Chicago in the 1960s. They, of course, were the pioneers that set the stage for the revolution. Tim, of course, was one of the strategists, along with the giant Rosie Simpson, who set up the 1963 school boycott. And I'm telling you, that was a momentous occasion. He, of course, also was the leader and organizer of the March on Washington from Chicago. Tim's political activism carried him far and wide. And of course, as has been stated, he was the, I guess you would call him a strategist, but also an advisor to Carol Moseley Braun, the first African-American Chicagoan to go to the U.S. Senate. And of course, as you know, he nurtured, and those were his words, the great Barack Obama. When Barack Obama first came to Chicago, he sat down with Tim, and Tim gave him encouragement. When he ran for the state Senate, he came to Tim. When he ran for the U.S. Senate, he came to Tim. And lastly, when he ran for the U.S. presidency, Tim was also one of his advisors. Tim, of course, was a registered Democrat, but he was not confined to the Democratic Party. He supported people who were progressives, who were independents. And that was the essence of Tim's political activity. I am impressed as a political scientist with the fact that he coined the phrase plantation politics, which is now a part of political science as a term that describes the way in which the machine in the city of Chicago treated African Americans by pitting one group against the other and controlling everything in the background.
this was, of course, his savvy against the Daley administration in the 1950s and 60s. And of course, I would like very much to ask you to join me in giving this great man a standing ovation. Please. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon. First of all, I have to say thank you, Ms. Zenobia, for the call. You truly made my day. I think I cried a few tears, so I want to thank you for inviting me here. It truly is an honor of my life to be here and to speak about one of my own personal heroes, and you and your family remain in my prayers. So as someone born here in Chicago, Dr. Black's name was very familiar to me. As a young man whose parents idolized Harold Washington, figures like Tamil Black and Lou Palmer were household names. As a teenager, I read and listened to almost everything I could, intrigued by the name Tamil Black, of course. He was an ambassador of the South Side of what Dr. Black called sacred ground. I was always enamored with the stories of my elders. That was just the way that I was raised. And Dr. Black, as an elder, was a masterful storyteller. And he inspired me as a young man and as an amateur history buff to not only learn the history of Black people in Chicago, but to use it as an inspiration to move us forward. As an adult, I moved to the Hyde Park, Kenwood area, and it was here that I first met Dr. Black, and I found him to be engaging and kind, and he always greeted me with a smile. Of course, his beloved Ms. Zenobia was usually right by his side, always elegant and disarming. Together, they represented Black excellence and were a model of beauty. Over the years, I would see Dr. Black and Ms. Zenobia around the neighborhood, Valois, Medici, and he'd occasionally regale me with stories of Black Chicago's glorious past, but he was always looking forward and hoping to inspire. I would say to him that I want more people in my world to hear your story. One day a few years ago, I ran into him and Susan Klonsky at Medici, and as usual, he was his normal, warm, and engaging self. But it was there that I learned about his book, Sacred Ground. I asked if he'd be willing to come talk to some of our members and our staff about his awesome book. And of course, Dr. Black being Dr. Black, he said yes. And after a few misses, he came and spoke about his book and his life. And it was almost exactly 2 years to today. Needless to say, our staff and members were transfixed by Dr. Black's stories and were amazed by his kindness and the generosity that he showed with his time. He stayed for hours. And let me tell you, the room was transfixed by his stories, and that's no small feat in a room full of union organizers. But Dr. Black, he had all us hanging on to his every word. And it's not an exaggeration to say that Dr. Black left an indelible impression, particularly at that time when there was so much darkness. His stories inspire us, and we learned of his great record as a labor leader and union organizer, co-founding along with A. Philip Randolph the Negro American Labor Council and becoming one of its first local presidents. Our staff and members proudly claim Dr. Black is truly one of our own. Given the trails that he blazed as a union organizer and fighter for social justice, It is all of us that owe a debt of gratitude to him because he was a true model for hope. We were privileged to stand in the light of his optimism and faith, while his wisdom propels us into a world that is truly better because of him. Because of the rich legacy of Dr. Black, we stand ready and prepared to continue the work that he had begun. The promise of a prosperous future will be his continued testimony. Once again, Ms. Zenobia, thank you so much. God bless you and the family. May Brother Black rest in power. Thank you.
I was sitting there just thinking about resting in power, and I looked down and I said, oh, I'm Monica Faith Stewart, I'm next. I just wanted to say that in one of my careers, my first one was in Chicago politics, and it was all because of Tim Black. I went to a community meeting right after I had come home from going to school out east. I came back home to sweet Chicago, and there was Tim telling young people that you have a responsibility. You've been out, you've had opportunities that Black people have never had before because Black people have paid for them. And you have a responsibility to keep that door open. And he said, and let me tell you, one way you can discharge that responsibility is to work in this campaign. And then he went to preaching about daily. And I said, hallelujah, I see the light. And I signed up to work in my first campaign to re-elect Ralph Metcalfe, Congressman of the 1st Congressional District, and also, now this is Chicago, Ward Committeeman. Now, Chicago's the only place in the world where people leave Washington and consider it a promotion to become a Ward Committeeman and an alderman, But that's how it was. And so I found myself in a precinct. Robert Taylor Holmes, you get a precinct list, a bunch of names, no apartments, 40, 50 something, whatever, South State. And you go, I won't bore you, but that was an experience. And I've been on the Freedom Trail ever since. And one thing I learned is no matter what, you do not give up your precinct. You hold your precinct. I don't know, some of you all maybe have heard of being an independent Democrat. But I've seen people tell me, I was appointed by Richie Daley and I'm an independent. I was like, whoa. Critical thinking. Critical thinking. I'll just leave it like that. But I wanted to say that right now, what I want to say that the people that Tim Black loved, Tim's favorite people, were people who would get up and do something. Tim, in my faith tradition, we're admonished not to just be hearers, but doers of the word, because faith without works is dead. So this is a shout out to the doers, to the true believers who work for peace and justice. Those of us who've been up at 3 o'clock in the morning, where you stand up in a precinct in Chicago. I went to South Africa because I told them where I'm from, they were talking about violence on election day. I said, where I'm from in Chicago, if nobody's in jail and nobody's in the hospital, you ain't had an election. That's the Chicago I'm talking about. Before we learn how had it together enough, I'm saying that that's the kind of Chicago where you had to stand up to elect Harold Washington mayor. Now, come on. So everybody who's ever stood up and registered a voter, come on, everybody can't be a millennial. Some of us remember Come Alive October 5. Stand up. Where is somebody here is a board member for the ACLU? Stand up. Somebody here walked on picket lines for the CBTU. Stand up. Somebody here is from the Midwest Workers Association. Stand up. Somebody here, come on now. Somebody here is from the Vivian Hart Society. Stand up. These are the people who have made history possible. And I am proud to say that Tim has made such a big difference in our lives. The movement for civil rights, for social justice, for peace had a soundtrack. It is our pleasure to present Oscar Brown's daughters, another fabulous Chicagoan, come on. His daughters, Maggie and Africa Brown, who will be singing a medley of protest songs from their father's inspiring lineup, followed by the incomparable Dee Alexander, who will sing Nina Simone's power song, For Women.
Now, if I'm not mistaken, I once read, back during that short spell I spent in school, that every slave was supposed to get
For slaving.
40 acres and a mule. Now, I'm not saying this to see folks sweat, because I'm not bitter, neither am my crew. But ain't nobody paid for slavery yet, and about my 40 acres and my mule. Breaking up big rocks on a chain gang, breaking rocks and serving my time. Breaking up big rocks on a chain gang, 'cause I've been convicted of crime. Hold it steady right there while I hit it. I reckon that ought to get it. Been working and working, and I still got so terrible long to go. Now I commit the crime of Lord and eating, crime of being hungry and poor. I left the grocery store man bleeding when he caught me robbing his store. Hold it steady right there while I hit it. Reckon that ought to get it. Been working and working, I still got so terrible long to go. Freedom ain't free, and working, freedom ain't free. Still got so terrible long to go. Freedom ain't free. Standing on the sacred ground. Freedom ain't still got so terrible long.
My sister Africa and I are so honored to share in this day, to honor such a great person, such a powerful force in our world. He taught us so much about coming up in the Great Migration, Not only Baba, Professor Timuel Black, but our grandfather, Oscar Sr., he too came up from Mississippi, and Baba from Alabama.
Makes it a great migration.
And he told us, he taught us, he inspired us to realize
Makes it a great
that it is
migration.
a great migration.
Tell her, Maggie. What
Makes it a great migration is that folk back then would travel great distances to secure a future of positive instances. And though the journey was filled with danger, keeping faith in what's unseen to my people is no stranger. Did I mention all the miles that they covered in search of their hopes and dreams to discover, seeking a life free of grueling labor and an opportunity to taste the city flavor, the way that it moved people out from the sharecropper life of the South. The fact that without Jim Crow, hope and progress had a chance to grow. So I'll tell you what makes it. Y'all say what makes it a great. I know it's Rockefeller, but come on, y'all. I'll tell you what makes it. Y'all say what makes it a great migration. Is that people made a new start in their life so that their children wouldn't have the same strife. It gave a chance for a better education to move black people forward for the new generation. The music moved up as people moved out into new frontiers and venues, no doubt. Then jazz got a college education. And jazz spread beyond the nation. Jazz spread through cities across the seas. Without segregation, racism could freeze. Music led to more communication, helping improve human relations. The fact that it came with a price, the price of many an American's life. The fact that it made you see, jazz improvisation made the people feel free. And I'll tell you what makes it. Y'all say
what makes it a great migration.
I'll tell you what makes it. What makes it a great migration. New landscapes gave way to seeking opportunity. When folk first arrived to build a new community, our people faced struggles and injustice. In spite of odds, we came up winning. You can trust this. And y'all see proof in the metropolis that flourished, making way for the movement which was nourished, building on unity, forging revolution, standing up for our future, marching towards solutions.
Way that it moved people out.
Came with a prize.
That it helped them
to grow, proud of to wear an afro. So I'll tell you what makes y'all say
what
makes it a great migration. Baba taught us what makes it a great migration. Standing on sacred ground.
What makes it a great migration.
What makes it history of you and me. We carry on a legacy. The only way we can be free. Building on that unity. Thanks to Professor Black and our big, strong, tall trees that teach us.
That's right.
Ushering in a new revolution.
That's right.
A new generation.
Here we go. I got you. See the sneaky pair over there, scheming after more than their share. See the bully shaking his fist. What a frightful way to exist.
They look at things as they are, face up to them fairly. They find life feels finer by far when we just deal fairly with everyone. A new generation is now on the scene. A new generation,
Not ugly or mean.
we're standing for right, demanding fair play for everyone, and we just won't have it any other way.
Greedy grandpa losing his grip used to have us all on his trip. Way back when he laid down the law that enforced your ma and your pa.
Progress, they did not want to know, therefore revolution was the only way we could go, seeking a solution that could be won. A new generation is coming to power, a new generation, and now is the hour. We're standing for right
And demanding fair play for everyone.
and we just won't have it any other way.
For Tim Black we say,
My name is Aunt Sarah. My skin is yellow. My hair is long. Between two worlds, I do belong. My father was rich and white. He forced my mama late one night. What do they call me? My name is Sophronia. My skin is tan. My hair is fine. My hips will invite you. My lips are like wine. Whose little girl am I? Anyone who has the money to buy. What do they call me? My name is Sweet Whoa, Sweet Thing. Miguel de la Serna on piano. My skin is brown. My manner is tough. I will kill the first mother I see because my life has been rough. I'm awfully bitter these days because my parents were slaves. What do they call me? My name is Peaches. Charles Heath, Junius Paul, Miguel de la Serna.
One of the things that I'm interested in, not because I play an instrument, but I listen. Captain Dad, DuSable was a legendary person. I graduated from DuSable, but I also taught them. Anyhow, DuSable has its own reputation as a stimulator for many people who became famous, like John Johnson, and of jazz, Gene Ammons. DuSable was an extension of Phillips when they were trying to keep us contained. And that building was originally named New Wendell Phillips, but a group of women meeting at George Cleveland Hall Library demanded that the new building be named after the first non-native to settle on the banks of what we now call the Chicago River. Jean-Baptiste Pointe de Sable, later, because people called it disabled, changed the pronunciation to DuSable. Though we will continue, all the talent was there. It's when Mr. Hansberry took his second case to the Supreme Court, broke restrictive covenants. That's when so many people moved out. Guys like me returned from the army, and we moved into the new neighborhood because we had GI privilege, more than they have, unfortunately, more than they have now. We had quite a bit of, because we were political. And in that community, they created, because of the mixture of talents, parallel institutions, parallel economic institutions, like Anthony Overton and Jesse Binger and others started businesses because of the density of the population, overcrowdedness. They began to move.
Wow. How we are all going to miss that voice, that man. I'm Bart Schultz of the University of Chicago Civic Knowledge Project, which has for many years had the honor and privilege of working closely with Professor Timuel D. Black and his brilliant, wonderful wife, Zenobia Johnson Black. Another round of applause for her, please. Working closely with them to try to make this world a better place, as Tim so often put it. Like his friend, Dr. King, Tim knew that love and justice go together. And that to change everything, we need everyone. He liked that idea, and he made the world a much better place. For all of you, for so many of us in Chicago and the world, showing us how to keep on keeping on, even when the skies are pretty gray. And as our next two speakers will testify, that inspiration continues, reminding us, this is how to live. We have two tributes coming up here. The first by Brandon Mercer Walker is from a brilliant young 13-year-old, 8th grader at Wilbur Wright Middle School in Munster, Indiana. He has already declared himself a young, lifelong learner. He's an honor roll student. He's already been to the White House, and he knows how to talk to the elders, including the elder, Timuel D. Black, and he's going to share his story about that. After Brandon, we'll hear from Dr. Lisa Yoon Lee, who is the cultural activist and executive director of the National Public Housing Museum. She's also associate professor in art history and women's studies at the University of Illinois at Chicago, and teaching faculty with the Prison and Neighborhood Art Project, also a member of the Chicago Torture Justice Memorials, a real doer. So, Brandon, come on up.
Good afternoon. With both joy and sadness, I am sharing my remembrance of Mr. Timuel Black. It was a great honor to have met and interviewed him in his home on June 25th, 2018, when I was just 9 years old. For as long as I can recall, I have adored learning, especially about history and biographies. When I first moved from Chicago to Munster, Indiana in the 4th grade, I continued to excel in school, but I saw a big difference in the environment and was extremely shy. Especially during Black History Month, I felt uncomfortable when little was taught about the civil rights movement or how fear of discussing the past leads to problems in the present. I also noticed that many of the kids in class who said racist things were misinformed. It seemed they never learned more than the same few major events that marked the movement. So, I talked with my family and decided I wanted to support equality and justice for all by doing my part to help educate the kids who will one day lead the world. Mr. Black was one of the first people I wanted to ask questions. My grandfather reached out to Mr. Black through a mutual friend, and he gave my grandmother and I a time when we could come to his home for a visit. Before entering Mr. Black's home, I thought about how I'm going to interview a person who is nearly a centenarian, is a lifelong learner and educator, a veteran, was an activist at the beginning of the civil rights era, knew my great-grandfather, and so much more. I felt proud to meet him. Timuel Black talked with me about many things, and he urgently repeated a few points that I will never forget. His first message seemed like a promise or a message on a protest sign. It was the one I've heard him say many times since we met in 2018. A change gon' come. He said to me, these young people, 5th grade, 8th grade, they have to believe that the future is gonna be better for them and be prepared. When George Floyd was murdered, I remembered Mr. Black's words and thought that the time is now for change to come. I cherish the ability to re-listen to my recording of our talk and reminisce about the impact he has had on me. Several times during the interview, Mr. Black made it clear to me that education is key to being prepared when change comes. He told me about being a high school teacher in Gary, where the school system was based on race and class. Some of my students were discouraged from being successful, and my goal was to teach them to be as smart as anybody, he said, reminding me that once upon a time, Barack Obama was your age, but he kept going to school so that when the opportunity arrived, he was prepared to be the first African-American president in history. Something I recall clearly is when Mr. Black spoke to me about it not being enough to advance just myself, and that I have a duty to advance others who may not have my same advantages. He said, the door is going to open and be prepared to walk in, but keep the door open so others can come in too. Although Mr. Black never mentioned this topic during our talk, when I remember him, I think of Black excellence, which I understand now to be both a mindset and action, a driving force for positive change passed on from generation to generation. When I learned of his passing, I realized that during my interview, Mr. Black was opening the door for me. I felt in my stomach a renewed drive to pursue the best possible education and do my part to help solve life's challenges in a way that benefits others as well as myself. Timuel Black's life is a source of encouragement for young people like me. I am so grateful I had the opportunity to meet in person such a wonderful role model. Thank you.
That won't be the last time we hear from Brandon, I'm sure. To my dear Zenobia and Tim's family, and to the honored guests, and to all of you, I'm so honored to be here with this beloved community. We all knew the day would come, but none of us were really prepared to call Dr. Timuel Black an ancestor. Tim had unbelievably high expectations for us, including myself, to be curious about one another, to ask questions, and be willing to listen with radical generosity. Along with all of his other extraordinary work and efforts, Tim made the time to be an instructor in the National Public Housing Museum's Oral History Training Program for public housing residents. As part of our Cultural Workforce Training Initiative, an effort to create the nation's largest collection of stories about public housing, this archive is also a call to our nation to have a more inclusive foundation for the stories we preserve and disseminate. Because the stories of people of color, of women, of people living in poverty are too often not preserved and valued. But Tim believed otherwise. He advocated and understood how important it was to change the single story about public housing history, one that is usually only about crumbling buildings, racialized poverty, or gangs and violence. Tim understood the untruth and dangers of reducing complex human beings and situations to a single narrative. Tim knew not just because he was a brilliant historian, but he knew from a lifetime of listening closely that public housing was also a history of family, of collective joy, of political organizing, resistance, and resilience. Stories of not just surviving, but of thriving. Stories that we can all learn from. When Tim came to teach at the museum, he wanted to make sure that the story of Miss Gwendolyn Brooks was remembered and told, of how she was living in public housing at Princeton Park Homes at 9134 South Wentworth in a dark apartment on May 1st, 1950. She couldn't afford to pay the electric bill when she got the call to inform her that she won the Pulitzer Prize. Tim wanted us to remember and tell the story about how her community chipped in so she could pay the bill, so that when the camera crews came to interview her, there was light. Tim wanted also to tell the story of how Miss Brooks helped to fund the poetry and art programs at Jenner School at Cabrini Green. There was seldom a time I would see Tim when he wouldn't remind me to please share the story of 6140 South Rhodes Avenue, a story he would beautifully tell to enraptured students on bus tours about the house that Carl Hansberry purchased in a time of legally enforced segregation and racial covenants, the home that was the inspiration for Lorraine Hansberry's Raisin in the Sun. And Tim, of course, always wanted us to remember all the musicians who had grown up and come from the projects, Jerry Butler, Curtis Mayfield, and so many more. But even more importantly, he urged us to record, preserve, share stories of so-called ordinary people, because those were the stories he cherished the most. Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie reminds us, when we reject the single story, when we realize that there is never a single story about any place or person, we regain a kind of paradise. Tim urged us to create that kind of paradise here on earth. He showed us by example that personal and social transformation is not a magical process, but a lifetime of dedicated work and accountability to our communities. He always had a principled position and stance, and he wasn't afraid to change his mind or admit when he was wrong, because he listened so closely to all of our stories. And he stood in solidarity with teachers, union organizers, with Black youth protesting hospital and school closures against police brutality and unjust monuments and memorials. Tim also insisted on telling the same stories over and again, not because he was forgetful, because there was always nuance and layers to a story and the invitation to listen more closely.
I will particularly cherish the evening I spent this past June with my husband Adam, Dr. Eve Ewing, Tim, and his beloved wife Zenobia, laughing, making, and eating Louis Armstrong's favorite recipe of red beans and rice for the National Public Housing Museum Summer Gala. Tim was already more fragile than I had ever seen him, but he made sure to share the stories of when he met Louis Armstrong. I am so honored that when the National Public Housing Museum opens in our permanent space in the last remaining building of the Jane Addams Homes on the near west side of Chicago, we will honor Tim's legacy and carry on his work by inaugurating the Dr. Timuel Black Oral History Recording Studio and National Archive. Today, in honor of Tim, please reach out to a stranger or a friend or an elder and ask them to share a story about where they grew up, and share your own story as well. Because Tim taught us that the shortest distance between two people is a story. I can think of no better way to celebrate his life well lived. Thank you.
Good evening. This has been fantastic. I don't know about you, but I feel as though I've been watching a PBS special live and in person. Between the music and the speeches, it's just been fantastic. I am looking across the chapel and I see so many familiar faces from the many events that we have shared together, celebrating Tim's 100th birthday at the South Shore Cultural Center, and then last year virtually, as we enjoyed his birthday party, we drove around Drexel, around and around and around. So if you were there, you know what I mean. Take a look at the program. I'm sure that you will see that we are just about in the home stretch, but we have a bit more to go. I know you've been sitting for about 2 hours, so I'm going to allow you to take a union break. You can stand up for 30 seconds and stretch and turn around and say hello to your neighbor with your eyes. Go ahead, you can do it. I mean it. I mean it, get up. Okay, union break is over. Our next speaker, the union break is over. 30 seconds. I'm sorry, Greg. I know it should be longer. Our next speaker really doesn't need an introduction. Chancellor Juan Salgado focused his career on improving education and economic opportunities for residents in low-income communities. And while they did not work together, and I'm sure that Juan was just a twinkle in his father's eye, Dr. Black left his incredible mark on city colleges. He held many positions between 1969 and 1989 and retired. He was instrumental in the renaming of the Loop College that we now know today as Harold Washington College. Please join me to give a warm welcome to Chancellor Salgado.
Thank you, Ms. Williams, and thank you, Zenobia, the family, for the invitation to be here today. It is truly an honor. I'm honored to be representing the institution that I lead, City Colleges of Chicago, where Dr. Black worked as a faculty member and administrator for 20 years. After serving as Chicago Public Schools teacher, Dr. Black was appointed Dean of Wright College in 1969. The year I was born, he was dean of one of our colleges. He held several subsequent roles, including vice president for academic affairs at Olive Harvey College, director and chairperson of community affairs for the entire district, and a professor at Loop College, which changed its name to Harold Washington College, largely due to Dr. Black's influence and advocacy. He did retire from City Colleges in 1989. Last March, we had the opportunity to award Dr. Black with the Ella Flagg Young Award in recognition of leaders that embody the vision and commitment to education of Ella Flagg Young, the first woman in America to head a major urban school system right here in Chicago. Dr. Black recognized the value of community colleges as a tool of upward mobility and empowerment and a means of creating a more inclusive Chicago economy that unleashes the talent of all of its residents. He cared, as we do, about removing barriers for students who have been historically and systematically locked out of higher education by cost or discrimination. City Colleges is an open access institution. It affords Chicagoans a freedom to learn and a freedom to grow that was core to Dr. Black's purpose in life. There are many, many Tim Blacks in City College's student body today, and many, many Tim Blacks that will be coming to City Colleges tomorrow. Students with strong values, keen minds, and big hearts who can't stand injustice. We want to help them change their community and make Chicago a better place like Dr. Black did. That is why we've announced the creation of the Timuel D. Black Scholars at City Colleges of Chicago. I'm pleased to announce this scholarship has been seeded with a $250,000 commitment from City Colleges, which we will continue to seed and will be awarded to learners who inspire to drive change in their communities. The City Colleges of Chicago Foundation, led by Rhonda Brown, will continue to raise funds to support and expand the scholarship. In addition to providing tuition fees and books, the scholarship will offer students the opportunity to be in fellowship, gain critical leadership skills, and access funds to help support their efforts to strengthen Chicago. Dr. Black was a scholar, a leader, and an icon who inspired generations to become activists and change agents. With this scholarship, we hope to fulfill the promise that embodies Dr. Black's legacy by emboldening others to follow his footsteps. On behalf of the City College's Board of Trustees, led by Chair Dr. Walter E. Massey, as well as the 68,000 students we serve each year, and our more than 4,000 faculty and staff, a very diverse faculty and staff indeed, thanks to his efforts over the years. I also want to present to Ms. Zenobia Black and the Black family a formal resolution in honor of the memory of Dr. Black that was passed by our Board of Trustees on November 4th, 2021. Thank you.
I'm sure that it comes as no surprise that Zenobia and the family received numerous resolutions to be shared with you this afternoon, but there are simply just too many to read. So I would just like to share with you a listing of the ones that we have received. We received one from the American Civil Liberties Union, the Independent Voters of Illinois Precinct Organization, known to many as IVI-IPO, the Rainbow Push Coalition, the Mary Herrick Scholarship Fund, the DuSable High School Alumni Coalition for Action, Wendell Phillips Hall of Fame Committee, the State of Illinois resolution from Senator Maddie Hunter, the Coalition Grace Dawson, the DuSable Museum of African American History, the University of Chicago, and the United States House of Representatives. We have received two, one from the Honorable Bobby L. Rush and the Honorable Robin Kelly. As the saying affectionately goes, behind every strong man is a stronger woman, right? Right? Yes, I am talking about none other than Zenobia Johnson Black. And yes, Johnson Johnson Black is her real name. While Z has spent many, many years enjoying time with Tim, she has also found time to be a good friend to so many of us. There is no woman stronger, no woman more loving and patient and giving and kind. On behalf of your sister girlfriends, and you know who you are, we want you to know how much we love you. And of course, we admire your strength and your class and your grace and your style. We are so blessed, and thank you to Tim for letting us share you with him. Please join me in welcoming Zenobia.
I just want to say thank you. Thank you to everyone who worked hard to make this day happen. To everyone who came out in the cold rain to pay tribute to my husband, Tim. Thank you so much. Today is really all about love. The love of one man for his community. Tim loved music, he loved books, he loved social justice, he loved teaching, and he loved me. But more than anything, Tim loved people, he loved his people and all people. Tim has always displayed leadership skills since the time he, at age 8 months, brought his family to Chicago from Birmingham, Alabama. And you know what? Tim loved himself, and consequently, he could show love to others. He grew up secure in the knowledge that he was loved and that his life mattered. That's what he thought, how he behaved, the decisions he made all mattered. At the end of his life, Tim was not afraid, not agitated or angry. He would say he had lived so much longer than most. He was grateful to still be here. He regretted that the combined effects of his aging body and the pandemic kept him home most of the time. He would have preferred to be out and about, going to lots of meetings, socializing, and enjoying live jazz at Room 43 on Sunday evenings. He would have preferred to have a calendar with at least a couple of meetings every single day, and each and every day with a little glass of Merlot and some good jazz on the record player. Tim truly loved his life. It was a great life. He would often say, "I've done the best I could. We couldn't accomplish everything. There's still so much to do." But he had no guilt, no regrets about his life work, and therefore was at peace with himself. He had lived up to his own standards. He had faith that young people would come forward and continue the work. Where would the next Tim Black come from? Where would the next Gwendolyn Brooks, the next Margaret Burroughs, the next Harold Washington, the next Nat King Cole, the next John H. Johnson, the next Clarice Davis Durham, the next Charles White come from? They are already here, sitting in classrooms, standing on street corners, playing basketball, and we need to show them love. They need to know that they are loved. They need to know that their lives matter, that they can make a difference. Tim would tell them, get your education, be ready so when the door opens, you can walk right in, and then hold the door open for the next person. I've had time to get myself prepared to talk at this event, but I must admit, seeing so many people gathered here in his honor is quite emotionally overwhelming. I can't help but think how much Tim himself would have enjoyed this gathering, all the music. So again, I say thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Natalie Moore. Thank you, Zenobia, for letting me speak and be a part of this program. The first time Tim called me his honorary granddaughter, my heart fluttered. I was so thrilled. And then I realized that he had a whole bunch of other honorary granddaughters, grandsons, grandchildren. But after I got over my feelings about that, I realized how important that is, that so many of us looked up to him and that we were a part of his family. I am really indebted to him with my journalism career, listening to him explain to me what Shelley versus Kramer was, telling me about delivering milk to the Hansberries, and telling me about teaching Jeff Fort and what he said to him I won't repeat in church, but it's on the first page of my Blackstone book. So he was a model for us, and I learned so much. And if you haven't read Sacred Ground, it is, I don't mean to be irreverent by calling him the Black Forrest Gump, but just everything he has touched in this century, it is truly amazing. So, the Negro Spiritual is a form of music much loved by Tim. Of the spiritual, Frederick Douglass wrote, "Every tone was a testimony against slavery, and every prayer to God for deliverance from chains." We are pleased to present pianist Robert Irving III's arrangement of Walk With Me, performed by veteran gospel vocalist Kathy Townsend and young up-and-coming vocalist Ajane Cook. Following the music selection will be the eulogy from Jonathan Jackson.
Walk with me. Walk with me. Walk with me, Lord. Please walk with me. All along my pilgrim journey, I want Jesus to walk with me. I want Jesus to walk with me. Walk with me, Lord. Please walk with me. All along my pilgrim journey, I want Jesus to walk trials, walk with me. Oh, in my trials, Lord, walk with me. When the shades of life are falling, oh, I want Jesus to walk with me.
Oh, in my sorrow, oh Lord, walk with me. In my sorrows, Lord, walk with me. Oh, in my heart is failing. Oh, yes, I want Jesus. So please, won't you walk with me?
In my troubles, Lord, walk with me. Oh, in my troubles, walk with me. Yes, when my life becomes becomes a burden, I want Jesus to walk with me. Walk with me, Lord. Walk with me. Oh, walk with me, Lord. Walk with me. Pilgrim journey. I want Jesus to walk with me. All along my pilgrim journey, I want Jesus to walk. I want Jesus to walk. I want Jesus to walk. Say it one more time. I want Jesus
Good evening. It is my pleasure and my privilege to stand here in my father, Reverend Jesse Jackson's rightful place. My father in heart and spirit wishes he could be with you today. My father oftentimes reminds me that he will wear out and not rust out. My father, the Reverend Jesse Jackson, has told me on numerous occasions that there is no retirement in the Bible. Although he has had some health challenges recently, he is a friend and brother beloved spiritually of Brother Timuel Black, a man who died fighting, never quitting, never giving up. The words that we heard, I wish I could stand on a star. I wish I could be where you are. They say don't ever give up. It's so hard to be something when you're not. We come to give God our honor, to thank him for the life of Timuel Black. We'd also like to have a very special warm thoughts from Miss Zenobia Black, his friend, his mate, his partner, his love, and his co-collaborator, activist, freedom fighter, educator. Stand up and give Zenobia a loving round of applause. Where there was Tim, there was Zenobia. I'd like to say a special happy birthday to Tim Black in heaven. On December 7th would have been his 103rd birthday. I'd like to take your attention to the text in Deuteronomy 22:7. When we come to a time with the elders, we are given by divine providence, if you will, our parents, grandparents, godparents, elders, others that lead us along the way. We must thank our elected officials that are here today. We must thank those members of the clergy that are with us today. And also thank those that are present that are from the activist community. I would ask that you stand. I would ask the students of Timuel Black to please stand. Those are the persons that warmed his heart over and over, someone that had some fight in them, someone that wanted to stand up and make a difference. That's the Timuel Black the Reverend Jesse Jackson knows. Miss Zenobia, not that long ago and not that far away, I would like to capsule my thoughts on Brother Black. Not that long ago and not that far away. Mr. Black is the missing link in our history. God granted him 102 years of age, not for himself, but for us. 102 years of age. Some people would say that slavery was a long time ago and you need not be concerned about it. Mr. Black knew firsthand from his grandparents and his parents the horror of slavery. Not that long ago, Mr. Timuel Black, some would say, don't be concerned about the history and the sabotage of lynchings. Mr. Black knew firsthand the detriments of lynching coming out of Birmingham, Alabama. Some would say Jim Crow was never that bad, the segregation of schools and the exploitation of African Americans. Timuel Black knew firsthand, not that long ago and not that far away. Mr. Black, I remember talking with him after Hidden Figures came out, Miss Zenobia the movie. I was with my grandmother, Miss Gertrude Brown, and I said, Gertrude, have you seen Hidden Figures? She said, are you talking about Katherine? I said, Katherine who? She says, Katherine Johnson, the scientist that did the math. I said, how do you know you've not seen the movie, Grandma? She says, that was my neighbor in Newport News, Virginia. not that long ago and not that far away. So I asked Mr. Black, can you tell me something about the era of Miss Johnson and when they came up? He says, Jonathan, remember in the Brown versus Board of Education. He was so gentle in sharing with you the information you did not know that you thought you knew. He says, Jonathan, remember they should have a prequel to that movie because Miss Johnson and all of those mathematicians were taught by black educators. After the Brown versus Board of Education, they got fired. I asked my father to please help me get your words together for this momentous occasion. How was it, Dad, I asked my father, when you came to Chicago and you were working with Timuel Black? My father reminded me, he says, Jonathan, Timuel Black was in Chicago when I got here. Then my father, he's very fast on his feet, don't take nothing away from the Rev. He went on and told me, he says, Jonathan, the NFL is 100 years old today. He says, broadcast radio, the license of radio, Mr. Starks, is 100 years old. The Drake Hotel is 100 years old. The Holland Tunnel is 100 years old. UCLA is 100 years old. Everybody met Tim Black when they came to Chicago. He said, but I want you to tell them that Dr. Howard Thurman asked the question, what do we have that is non-negotiable and irreducible? That is the essence of our will to be free. Reverend Martin Luther King said it another way. He says that which we have, he cared less about pious irrelevancy and sanctimonious trivialities. He was wed to Tim Black because he had a fighting and a marching spirit. He was not simply a historian. He looked to the past because we know that history does not repeat itself. People repeat history. With the knowledge that Mr. Black knew of the past, he used it in the present to shape the future. We stand here today to honor Mr. Black. My father, Reverend Jackson, told me he came to Chicago in 1964 as a student to organize while he was a student here at the University of Chicago. The children that were from Forestville were being prevented from going to a new school. That new school that they fought for, he met Timuel Black on the picket line because we had hyper-segregated schools then and now. There are 300 predominantly African-American schools in the city of Chicago today where black students will not have a white classmate, then and now. After the boycotts and the fights for Forestville, there was a new school that was erected, and that became King High School on Drexel Boulevard. There was resistance to having the name King High School because some city leaders thought there would be a riot every January 15th just because it was named after Reverend Martin Luther King. He went on to tell me that Timuel Black helped organize and bring Reverend Martin Luther King to Chicago. Why was that significant? Because when Martin Luther King came to Chicago, there was resistance even by members of his own faith and the clergy to say, we don't need Reverend Martin Luther King in Chicago. Some African-American ministers that were on plantation politics were so wed to Mayor Daley, they told him, must Daley bear this cross alone? There was a minister that was so upset that after they changed South Parkway Boulevard from South Parkway Boulevard to Martin Luther King Drive, he changed his address so he wouldn't have to see King's name on his mail. Oh, we're talking about Timuel Black today. My father says Tim had an authority in his voice. His voice had a wisdom. After King left Selma, he came to Chicago. I was on many television programs with my father and Mr. Black, and my father and Mr. Black told me there was northern regulations and there was southern segregation, that Jim Crow in the North became more insidious, and our challenges still must continue to be fought. He told me that Tim was a man that opened doors and brought people in and brought people up. He was the master teacher. He says that great leaders are creditors, great teachers are creditors, great teachers leave something more behind. They are not our debtors, they are our creditors. You remember that person who taught you something special. Where we are now is a function of where we have fought for and stood. I remember on the last time I was with my father in South Africa, and word got out that my father was in town, Reverend Jackson, and President Mandela had heard he was in town and was no longer receiving public audiences. And he asked my father to come by to his foundation. We came there, and Mr. Mandela's ankles were swollen and could barely stand. My father came, he stood up, and people were asking him to please, Madiba, sit down. And he exclaimed to the top of his voice, "Freedom fighter," when he greeted the Reverend Jesse Jackson. My father, if he had his voice and could stand before you today, he would look at Tim Ewell's black image and his memory and say, "Freedom fighter," a man who gave his all for his people. He would tell you that Tim got better and was never bitter. That we must understand that Tim was born in the era of America's disgrace, when African Americans could not own one of those NFL teams, could not own one radio license, could not go to the Drake Hotel, could not walk across certain streets or even go to Rainbow Beach right here in the city of Chicago. This did not happen by chance. Others fought, and Tim is on that right side of history. I asked my father about Brother Tim Ewell Black, and he told me that Tim Ewell wanted to have the spirit of the Tuskegee Airmen after he came back from World War II. He fought Nazis abroad and had to fight Jim Crow and Nazism right here in the United States of America. Tim had the spirit of victory abroad and victory at home. Tim came back to fight. He was unapologetic about the stances that he took. Being with Reverend Martin Luther King was not popular when Tim opened his arms to Brother Martin Luther King. And in closing, I will tell you, Tim is a man's man who transcended generations. I can see him now sitting at Valois's, leading, eating, and teaching. I can see him with a class outside of the walls. He would have students around him freely teaching. It is through Tim that I understand teachers do not teach for a living. Teachers teach for life because it's in them and it's something that they cannot put aside. Tim Black, we thank God for you and our ancestors. My father lastly told me, he says, Tim, for a century, was on the right side of history, Alia. For a century, Zenobia, Tim was on the right side. And Reverend Smith, as Tim is greeted into heaven on his 103rd birthday, my father, Reverend Jackson, told me, Tim does not have to have any apologies to God.
I have great news. We have 8 surprise speakers waiting to come up. Only 8. This has been a wonderful remembrance and celebration in honor of Timuel Black. I'd like to ask that we briefly offer a moment of silence for our own personal reflection at this time. Thank you. Well, I do really have good news now. The AACM's Great Black Music Ensemble reflects the organization's motto, Ancient to the Future. The ensemble, conducted by Mawada Bowden, will make a joyful sound and then lead us all in a second line procession out of the chapel. We invite you to join the second line after the family and our special guests in the front pews follow behind. It says here, we need to clear out the chapel by 6 o'clock. We way past that. So put your coats on and your hats very quickly and dance your way out. But thank you all very, very much for these really warm remembrances of Tim. God be with you all. Thank you.